In this second part of the tutorial, we're going to light a nighttime scene with a moon sky. This second tutorial will build on the techniques and the concepts that we laid out in the first tutorial. Nighttime lighting with a starry sky. So I do recommend you watch this first, if you haven't yet. And this is the result that we're going to achieve in this second tutorial. So let me go ahead and open up the example scene that we used. This scene contains no blueprint sky and no lighting actors. And it has everything that we had in the first tutorial. So it has custom static meshes, BSP brushes, a water plane, and a basic landscape. It's a simple scene, but it gives us context for lighting. So you can either use to light your own custom scene you created, or you could follow along just by inserting and adjusting all the actors that we're going to use without having a scene to light. But it does help a lot when you have some context to your lighting. So in the first tutorial we used the default level, and we had the blueprint sky and all the actors connected together, linked up, lighting our scene. And in this tutorial I'm going to show you a different method. We're going to insert the blueprint sky and connect and link the directional light and atmospheric fog ourselves. So you get a different method of using a blueprint sky instead of using the default level. So as I mentioned in the first tutorial, this blueprint sky sphere comes default with every project inside Unreal Engine 4. And that's what we're going to be using. If you want something more custom, anything dynamic in the sky, animated material, maybe you want to have stars and moon at the same time, or maybe a different kind of moon, you'll have to create your own material, your own sky material, and use that instead. So we're going to be working with the limitation of what the blueprint sky sphere offers. And we can get a lot of variety with it, so it's a great way to begin lighting your levels without having to create your own custom content. So let's go ahead and insert the blueprint sky sphere. To get access to it without going to default level, we need to enable engine content. So what I'm going to do is inside content browser, use this view options drop down menu and enable show engine content. This will show a couple of folders. You want to select engine content, and let's go ahead and search for sky sphere. And here it is right here. I'm going to left click and drag right into our scene. Let's go ahead and disable engine content so we get rid of these folders. Next, let's insert a directional light. Let's go to lights, directional light, and drag it into our scene. We can't see anything because we need to go into lit mode. You can press Alt 4 or go right here and choose lit. Next, you want to select the blueprint sky sphere, and in the details panel we want to link the directional light with our sky. So under here, directional light actor, in the drop down menu select directional light. Now we can go ahead and rotate the directional light and position the sun anywhere in the sky that we want. So what we're going to be doing is using this sun disk to simulate the moon. So instead of using it as a sun, this is going to be our moon actor in the sky. So let's go ahead and position where you want it. And again, we need to refresh our material on the sky to see the updates. So select the blueprint sky and click on refresh material. I already have the specific direction and the angle that I want the moon to appear and light our level. So I just copied and pasted the rotation values. So I'm going to quickly paste them right in here. And actually what I need to do is select the directional light and not the sky. I'm going to paste these values here. And let's refresh our material again. In the first tutorial we pointed our directional light straight up. That gave us the starry sky, and that is coded into the blueprint sky sphere. That also removed the sun disk. And for this scene we want to have the sun disk, or in our case the moon disk, and the directional light will be used in this environment to simulate moonlighting. But the problem right now is the sky sphere doesn't look anything like nighttime. So we need to change the colors of the sky. Let's go ahead and select our blueprint sky sphere And in the details panel, disable colors determined by sun position. This will allow us to change these 4 properties which change the color of the sky. Zenith color is when you are looking straight up. Horizon color is when you're looking straight ahead at the horizon line. Cloud color is of course color of the clouds. And overall color allows you to give a tint to the entire sky sphere. Or if you use black and white values, you can actually control the opacity or how visible your sky is. So go ahead and begin changing the colors to what you want. I already tested this, so I have these colors already planned out, so you don't have to sit there and watch me do it in real time. So I'm just going to copy and paste these right into the 4 properties. So for zenith color, I'm going to use this color right here, dark greenish. And the reason I'm using dark green is the original idea I had is that I wanted to have kind of a darker greenish color for nighttime, which I have ended up changing it to more of a blue hue, a bluish color. But the idea was to have more green nighttime color. But we do end up changing it through post-process later. So for horizon, I use this color. Then for cloud color, I made them a little bit darker. Yet we can still see them. And for overall color, I changed it to this value, which gave a slight color to the entire sky sphere. So here's what we have so far. And the intensity of the directional light is way too strong. So select the directional light and change the intensity to 0.01. To get to this value, I had to test quite a few lighting bakes. So I just want you to know that I did spend some time trying out different values and baking, see the results. And this is what I came down to for this scene with the intensity for directional light of 0.01. And for light color, I chose a lighter greenish color, similar to our sky. So I have this value already picked out, and it's this color right here. Click OK. And before we bake our lights and see what our current lighting situation looks like, we need to insert a Lightmass importance volume. This needs to be inserted and surround the important areas of our level where we want to focus our lighting in. So let's go to volumes, Lightmass importance volume, switch over to scale, and just scale this out. I'm going to go to unlit mode, Alt 3. And make sure that it's surrounding the important areas of the scene. And now let's go ahead back to lit mode, Alt 4, and build our lights on preview. Here we are. Now before we start focusing on lighting, I want to insert one more actor that works with the blueprint sky sphere, and that is atmospheric fog. It actually works with the directional light, but those 3 actors, the blueprint sky sphere, directional light, and atmospheric fog, work together. So I'm going to go into visual effects and insert atmospheric fog. Then I want to select directional light and link the atmospheric fog to work with the directional light. So with the directional light selected, in the details panel, scroll down and enable atmosphere fog sunlight. Now atmospheric fog doesn't add a lot of fog into our scene, although you could go in and tweak the properties. We will leave it as is because I wanted to show you how to have these 3 actors linked together. But we'll actually be using exponential height fog to add fog into our level, just like we did in the first tutorial. So we just built our lights, and we can still see that everything is way too bright in the level. This is actually due to auto exposure. But before we insert our post-process volume and begin tweaking auto exposure, we need to insert a skylight first. Skylight is a very important actor for lighting our scenes. So let's go to lights and drag skylight into a level. So of course it's way too bright, but again this is due to auto exposure and not the lights themselves. So before we begin tweaking any intensity of a skylight or try to change the intensity of a directional light, let's go to volumes and insert post-processing volume. Select it. In the details panel, search for unbound and enable infinite extent unbound. This will make post-processing volume universal. Next, let's tweak auto exposure. Enable minimum and maximum brightness. And you want to clamp these values down to properly expose your level, your scene, for nighttime. Right now it's way too large of a difference. So I'm going to clamp these down to 0.3 for minimum brightness and 0.4 for maximum brightness. Now it's beginning to look more like nighttime. Let's go ahead and build our lights to establish what the scene looks like now. Let's go ahead and take a look. And this looks like a good start. As a side note, and I mentioned this in the first part, that what you're seeing on screen now may be too dark. And this is due to the compression of the video compared to what you'll be seeing and what I'm seeing on the monitor. We want to begin tweaking skylight properties, and also at this point you could go back and tweak more of the directional light intensity. I like the directional light intensity right now where it's at. So we're going to tweak skylight properties. Just like in the first tutorial, we'll be using as the last capture scene, which will be using our sky sphere to bounce lighting back into our scene. And the two properties you want to tweak are intensity and indirect lighting intensity. I've already tested to find the ones that work for this scene, but I did spend a lot of time in baking trying to find what looks good. So this will be trial and error at first, but all you need to focus on are on intensity and indirect lighting intensity. So for intensity, I'm going to leave it at 1, and for indirect lighting intensity, I increased it to 25. To see the results, we need to bake our lights again. And here we are. Just like in the first tutorial, due to the compression of the video, it might be too dark to see. The results are always going to be better and more noticeable on the monitor, so I just want you to be aware when you're watching this tutorial. Now let me show you the before and after in a screenshot. Here is the default, skylight intensity of 1 and indirect lighting intensity of 1. And here is the updated version with indirect lighting intensity of 25. So I'm just going to go back and forth, and you can see right in this area that it's getting brighter. Now it's still not bright enough, and we can continue to play around with intensity and indirect lighting intensity values, but just like in the previous tutorial, we're going to add a bit of environmental color. So let's go to world setting, and you'll find this on the window, world settings. Let's scroll down, and under environment color, we want to choose a constant overall color that will be added to the scene. So I already have a value picked out, but you can use the slider and just add very subtle color value. Again, this will be added to your entire environment, so be careful, as it can cause incorrect reflection capture brightness. And this property doesn't actually bounce any light. So I already have a value picked out, and I'm going to go ahead and paste this in. And it's this dark greenish color. Let's click OK. And to see the results, we need to build our lights. Let's go ahead and take a look at the before and after. Here is without environment color, and here is with. And you can see that it added overall constant color to our scene. And if I zoom in a little closer, you just pay attention to this area and this landscape area. So this is with, and this is without. These changes are very subtle, but this is the nature of lighting nighttime scenes. Now let's go ahead and adjust some properties in the sky. Select the blueprint sky sphere, and we're going to turn down sun brightness to 15. We get a little less glow of the moon, and again you can increase this to a larger value to get a more prominent glow. For cloud speed, I'm going to leave this at 2, This is how fast the clouds are moving across the sky, and you need to enable real time to see it. Let's go ahead and disable it. Cloud opacity, decrease it to 0.5. So those clouds are not as strong, and they fit the scene better. And star brightness does not have any effect because we don't have any stars. Now at this point, our nighttime lighting looks pretty good. This is a good base to go from, and we're going to focus on artificial lights, or spotlights in our scene. These will come from light posts, these static meshes right here. I have one here, and there's two here. I already inserted spotlights into the scene. I'm going to go to World Outliner, and I just searched for spotlights, and I'm just going to enable their visibility. All I did was went to Lights, and inserted a spotlight. And I moved and rotated it into the position from the light source. So I haven't touched any properties. I just simply inserted these so you don't have to watch me do it. And I positioned one here and two here. So I'm going to select them all. So we tweak properties for all of them at once. Let's go back to Alt-4 for lit mode. And for intensity, I'm going to increase it to 15,000. And we can't see it because I disabled Effect World earlier. So I'm just going to reset it to default. Light color, I'm going to go with a warmer hue. And I'm going to copy and paste the color I already tested. And it's this light orange color. Click OK. For outer cone angle, I'm going to set it to 75. This will give us a larger cone of influence for the light. And inner cone is going to be set at 50. The area between inner cone and outer cone is where the light begins to fade out until it's no longer lighting our scene. I'm going to enable use temperature and make our light a bit warmer. I'm going to set this to 5500. Press G for game mode, and let's take a look. Now we are ready to insert exponential high fog. Let's go to Effects, and left click and drag exponential high fog into the scene. In the details panel, we want to adjust fog density to 0.35, and now we need to change our color, our fog in scattering color. I'm going to give it the same hue as our lighting, which is kind of greenish color. I already have a value picked out, so I'm just going to copy and paste this right in here. Let's click OK. And again, the way I chose these values is I would change these various properties, increasing them, decreasing them, until I found what worked for the scene. And this will take you a bit of time to find. For fog height falloff, we'll leave this at default. Fog max opacity is going to be 0.5. And start distance at 250. Let's scroll down, and we want to enable volumetric fog. The one value we're going to tweak is extinction scale, and we'll change this to 0.6. This determines how much light is being absorbed by the fog. Higher value, the fog absorbs more light, and lower value absorbs less light. And 0.6 is what I chose. So here's what we have so far. This is a good starting point for our nighttime moonlighting scene from where we can begin to tweak our color grading. So before we get into LUT and night color grading, let's go ahead and build our lights, establish the final base lighting for our scene that we can build on top of, and change our colors. So let's find a good view to take a screenshot from, something that captures the essence of your entire scene. Press F9 to take a screenshot. The screenshot will be saved into your project folder, saved, screenshots, Windows. Here is a screenshot. Then open the screenshot in Photoshop. Next, you need an LUT texture. This is a small PNG file that will hold your adjustment layer information that we tweak in Photoshop. This texture right here. In the first tutorial, I show you how to get this. Then what you want to do is drag this right on top of your screenshot, and you can place it anywhere you want. And now you can add any adjustment layer and change how your image looks. And make sure that all your adjustment layers are placed on top of your LUT. So you have a screenshot, LUT texture, and all of the adjustment layers. And here's what I did to the screenshot. Here I have the original screenshot, the LUT texture. Then I added curves, made it a little brighter, adjusted levels, color balance, changed the entire scene to more blue, and tweaked individual colors for reds and yellows by adding hue and saturation layer. So this is what I want my final scene to look like. Now all of this information will be saved into the LUT texture. So hold Control, left click on the LUT layer. This will select, marquee select, the LUT texture. Then we want to go to Image, Crop. This will crop to the marquee selection. Quickly to make sure, we're going to go to Image, Image Size. It's 256 by 16, and that's correct. And now we want to save this as a PNG and give it a name. I'm going to rename this to LUT Nighttime Moon. And click Save. Set it to None. Now let's go ahead and import our LUT texture into Unreal Engine 4. Select the folder you want to import the texture into. I have WOLD Assets, Textures folder, and LUT. Click Import. Select the LUT texture. Then double click on the texture to open Texture Editor. Under Texture Group, change this to Color Lookup Table. MIP Gen settings will be switched to No MIP Maps. Click Save. Let's close this. Select the post-processing volume. Under Color Grading, Global, enable Color Graded LUT. Select the LUT texture, and then use Selected Asset from Content Browser. Our scene colors will now be adjusted to the LUT texture. Now, as we talked about in the first video, LUT textures are now being moved away from. So to keep your scene more consistent across a variety of display outputs, you want to use your LUT as a target to aim for. But then what you really want to change are the color grading options under Global, Shadows, Midtones, and Highlights. This is what you want to adjust to change the colors of your scene. So we have our LUT, and this is what our target output that we are aiming for. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to disable this completely and use the color grading options to get those colors from the LUT. So this took a bit of time to find the right values to match the LUT. So I already did the test and I already have these values. So you don't have to sit there watch me adjust and tweak every single color and every single value. But what I did was I first focused on the global settings by changing saturation, contrast, gamma, gain, and offset. And the easiest way for you to think about gamma, gain, and offset is gamma are your midtones, gain are your highlights, and offset are your shadows. And then you can go in further and continue tweaking just the shadows, just the midtones, and just the highlights. So let's go ahead back up to global. For saturation, I set this to 1.1. For contrast, 1.1. And I removed green and blue. Let me open this up. For gamma, I changed this to 1.15 and I added more blue. So I have 0.83 and for green 0.81. So essentially I'm adding more blue and removing red and green from the midtones. For gain, which are the highlights, I adjusted this to 1.5 and removed or added yellow, which essentially removed a bit of green, which I have 1.49, and blue, which I have 1.21. I did not adjust offset, so I'm going to disable this. I then adjusted midtones by adjusting contrast, which I changed to 1.2, and I added a bit of blue green, and what I have here is 1.2 for blue and green and 1.1 for red. Then I have gamma set to 1.2 and I added a bit of yellow. So for green I have 1.18 and for blue 1.14. And then I have gain. For gain I have 1.2 And I also adjusted offset, which are the shadows. For this, I have 0.01. And then I added a bit of yellow. For green, I have 0.009. And for blue, 0.002. And then for the final part, I adjusted highlights. I adjusted gamma to 1.5. Added a bit of yellow. For green, I have 1.48. And for blue, I have 1.40. Then I have gain, 1.5. Added a bit of yellow as well. For green, I have 1.48. And for blue, 1.43. And last, offset, which I have 0.1. And I added a bit of yellow also. So for green, I have 0.09. And for blue, 0.07. So essentially, I am fine-tuning within the highlight range these three values. Within the highlights, I'm tweaking the midtones, the highlights, and the shadows, which is a very small range only within the highlights. So here is the final scene using nothing else but color grading inside Unreal Engine 4, which looks nearly identical to the LUT texture, except that our scene is properly calibrated for all output displays.